Today, we're diving into a world woven from whispers and time, exploring a couple of stories that have journeyed through generations to reach us.
All right, so hop in, buckle up. We're heading to a place where reality kind of bends, where the oldest stories come alive. Our first stop, North Africa.
So, picture this. Many, many years ago, there lived a king. This guy had everything. Immense wealth, countless treasures, a big family, you name it. But for all his riches, a deep, unshakable unhappiness just settled over him like a heavy cloud. You could just see him pacing through these grand rooms, surrounded by all this gold and silk, just thinking, I have everything and none of it makes me happy. Well, finally, his frustration just completely boiled over. He calls in his entire staff and just shouts at them, why can't I be happy? What do I have to do?
So one of his workers pipes up, suggests he just, look at the night sky. But that just made the king angrier. He was furious that the moon and stars were things he could never, ever own. Then someone else suggests filling the palace with music, day and night. Oh, bad idea. The king's face just turned red. The thought of endless music, to him that sounded more like a prison than a cure.
Okay, so just when it seemed like all hope was lost, one of the workers comes back with this really peculiar idea. He says the king has to find a truly happy man, wear his shirt, and just let that man's joy soak right into his own soul. And you know what? For the first time in ages, the king felt this tiny flicker of hope. He actually said, I like your idea. And just like that, he sent his soldiers out with one single command. Search every corner of the kingdom, and don't you dare come back until you found a happy man. So the soldiers, they searched and they searched. And it turned out to be surprisingly difficult. It was like happiness was the rarest thing in the whole kingdom. But then in this tiny little village, they started hearing stories about a certain man, a guy who had practically nothing, but his face was always lit up with a smile, and he was always singing. So when the soldiers finally found him, he made this really simple, confident claim. Just looked at them with this big, easy grin and said, I am the happiest man in the world. And that was it. They knew. This was their guy.
So they rush him to the palace immediately. The king, he is just buzzing with excitement. He's already taken off his own fancy royal robes, declaring, at last, I'm going to be a happy man. So the small, smiling man walks in, and the king just eagerly gestures to him. Come here, my friend, he says. Please, take off your shirt.
And as this man gets closer, still with that unwavering smile, you can just see the king's hopeful expression start to curdle. It goes from puzzled to confused, and then right back to that familiar simmering anger. So what did he see?
Well, as the king looked at this man, the man who supposedly held the key to his happiness, he finally realized the truth. The happiest man in the world had no shirt. So while that first story was all about what was missing, our next tale is about a secret that's hidden in plain sight. We're going to travel now from the king's quiet room to a bustling market where a young boy named Kalari is about to follow his nose right into a huge mystery. See, there was this soup, right? It was practically a local legend. It was sold by this old woman that nobody really knew. She'd just appear every day with a pot of the most incredible chicken soup, and it was always piping hot, and then poof, she just vanished without a trace. Now, Kalari loved that soup more than anything. But even more than that, he was just eaten up by curiosity. Where did this woman come from? How did she make this soup? So he comes up with a plan. When she's done for the day, he's going to follow her. So the very next day, the old woman puts her empty pot on her head and leaves. And Kalari starts to follow, keeping a safe distance. And let me tell you, this journey was long. They crossed a river, they had to push through grass that was as tall as he was, and then they started climbing this super steep, high hill. And as they're climbing, the sun starts to go down, and Kalari starts to get a little scared. But man, the thought of that soup just kept him going. Finally, at the very, very top of the hill, he sees it, a small hut. And outside that hut is a pot so huge it just makes him gasp. So he creeps a little closer to get a look, and sees that it's totally empty. Kalari dives into the bushes just in the nick of time, right as the old woman comes out of her hut. He watches, barely breathing, as she stands in front of this giant pot and starts this low rhythmic chant, magic pot, make hot soup for me. And within moments, steam starts pouring out of the pot, carrying that familiar,
absolutely irresistible smell. Kalari's stomach is just rumbling like crazy. And when the woman finally goes back inside her hut, he knows. He just can't resist. He tiptoes over to the pot, peers inside, and yup, it's full of bubbling, delicious chicken soup, but there's no fire underneath it. I just have to have some, he whispers to himself. He reaches his hand down into the hot broth, trying to grab a piece of chicken, but right at that moment, the door to the hut creaks open.
The old woman is standing right there in the doorway. Her eyes are locked on Kalari's hand, which is still in her pot, and this strange look comes over her face as she cries out, "Ooh, my last ingredient has arrived."
Kalari did not stick around to hear another word. He yanked his hand right out of that soup and just scrambled down the hill as fast as his legs could possibly carry him. The old woman ran after him, but he was way too quick. He didn't stop running for a second until he burst right through the door of his own home.
He told his parents every single thing he'd seen, and from that day on, things were different. The old woman with the amazing chicken soup, she was never seen in the market again. And after hearing Kalari's story, you can bet that none of the other villagers ever dared go up that hill to find out what happened to her. So the hill just remained this place of mystery. It became a whole new piece of local folklore. So much so that now, whenever clouds gather around the top of that hill, the villagers just look up, nod to each other, and say, "Look, there's the steam from the magic pot."
So you have a king who has everything except happiness, and a boy who discovers a pretty terrifying secret. You know, these tales are a great reminder that truth and magic, they're often not at all what they seem. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other stories are hiding in plain sight, right here, all around us?